So, we are not just a one-horse town. IT. So, what does that mean, the last city standing? What do all of these California cities have in common? They were once thriving equestrian communities lost to development. Not a bad thing. We're all different and we all have unique needs and desires. But at one time, all of these communities had the three elements needed to support pleasure riding equestrian activities. Large lots to trails to open space, or to my mind, what Norco really is elbow room. Now how is it that Norco, of all Southern California cities, and not just a designated area located in a city or a county, but a full city, has fought off high-density housing, developers for decades, and still sits on half-acre lots, has trails on most streets, more parkland and open space per person than anywhere else in Riverside County, and is still able to provide a full-service city complete with parks, police and fire, youth and senior activities, fiscal support staff, public works, and much more, with less than 1/10 of our budget coming from property tax revenue. Simple answer, the horse. The desire for an equestrian lifestyle prompted the need and desire to fight for large lots where you can not only keep large animals, but play ball with your kids, grow a large garden, whatever. In a very real way, the fight has been, and will continue to be, a fight for open space surrounded by a sea of concrete. To protect our large lot zoning and animal keeping, we've self-imposed financial hardship. Preservation of our large half-acre lots has meant and continues to mean we collect 1/3 as much property tax as nearby cities. To me, this begs the question, if horses go, what will motivate people to protect those large lots? The more complex answer to how we preserve this very unique community is heart, grit, stubbornness, a willingness to respect and stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and carry forward a dream. Resident after resident, council after council, for over 100 years, this community has actually done the impossible. We have resisted and fought unbridled development and battled and sacrificed to maintain the single rarest commodity in Southern California, elbow room. First settlers, who would one day play a key role in preserving Norco's lifestyle, arrived in future Norco in 1909. Flim-flam developers sold the dream that they could replicate Corona's citrus empire. Folks sucked every penny they had into those small farms, only discovered that the water system pumped mud, the roads were impassable for weeks on end because of flooding, and frost killed the citrus trees, and those that survived were knocked down by the Santa Ana winds. But those pioneers did not give up. They pulled together, learned to profitably plant low-laying grapes, melons, potatoes, and lettuce that hugged the ground during the Santa Anas and were grown during the warmer months. They did the impossible. They built a small school, even a public library. They built a community on broken dreams. This was the beginning of what was called the Norco spirit. The day World War I was declared, over 30 men in a community of less than 110 people enlisted. That's who we are. Along came Rex Clark, and he wanted to build a city of self-sustaining ranches, where a man could feed his family and live off the land, and he only wanted go-getters. He did a national campaign and said, only go-getters should buy my property. Riverside, Los Angeles counties marveled at the new community called Norco that rose from the dust, and whose motto became Acres of Neighbors. It was Norconians who built a new water system, improved the roads, and the beginning of a downtown that Clark promised would rival the best of cities. Norco was born May 13, 1923. That little spot is downtown. Clark recruited across the nation, as I said, and he said if you worked hard, you could be your own master. But the truth is, frost and winds were tough enemies. But worse, surrounding competing agricultural communities who controlled transportation blocked us from getting our produce to market. So what we did was we became chicken farmers. In a very short order, we became the #1 chicken farming community in Southern California, maybe California. In fact, it was a place where even a woman could have a chicken farm. And this caused a lot of debate nationwide because people said, well, women can't work, women can't own businesses. Well, Mrs. Courier begged to differ. And eventually she became very key to us becoming a rural lifestyle community. Along came the Then we built the Norconian, did the impossible again, became national news, and then we walked into the Great Depression. Very interesting time. Once again, our produce was blocked. We had nowhere to sell it. So what we became were truck farmers, illegal truck farmers, in which literally you could be driving along and somebody would pull you literally out of your truck. But we banded together, formed a co-op, and we survived. Then the Navy came. Truth of the matter is the Navy saved Norco. We were in deep guano before they came. All of a sudden they decided to build the second largest hospital on the West Coast that eventually would have 6,000 patients, 1,200 employees, and we built it. And in fact, Captain Jensen, who was the commanding officer, at one point said, boy, these Norconians, they don't strike, they don't stop, no matter how old, young, women, men. What is it about them? They keep working. He finally asked somebody and wrote this in the letter, and they said, from hunger, I don't want to starve anymore. Then following World War II, Johnny from Nebraska, oops, by the way, just so you know, here's the Norconian, and then that's the Naval Hospital. So you have the Norconian 29, Naval Hospital, and then you have the room years. After World War II, Johnny from Nebraska, Jane from Idaho decided they liked the weather in California and decided to stay in the state, and thus began the greatest building boom, literally in the history of Southern California, and the largest internal migration in the history. Riverside County in 1940 said, you know what, we've got to do some zoning. And every city began to fall in line, every county began to fall in line, except Norco. We refused to allow our property to be zoned. We were home to those go-getters, even though they were gray, and they simply said, nobody is going to tell us what we're going to do with our land. That's Hamner Avenue in the 1950s. This was a very eclectic place where a chicken farmer could give advice over the fence to an inquiring neighbor as to the best way to feed cows. The neighbor just happened to be the person who worked at the new Navy lab, who built missiles, and whose team Navy had just discovered the infrared technology required to build heat-seeking missiles, or perfected the Sidewinder missile. Those are the people, along with the Orange County people that came along, who were run out of other equestrian communities, and they banded together to fight and preserve the rural way of life. They were under siege from crackerbox developers and an increasingly hostile board of supervisors who were tired of Norco, quote, not playing ball, unquote. They fought back the Norconians and regularly stormed the board of supervisor meetings with new dense housing when new dense housing projects were proposed. One supervisor stated, my patience is wearing thin with these people who dare to think they can stop our vision of progress, unquote. To which one old timer said, if your vision of progress is building 1 million houses made of paper 2 feet from another 2 million houses made of paper, well then nuts to you, Mr. Supervisor. Finally, in the early 1960s, we finally cut a zoning deal with the supervisors in which we created half-acre parcels, but a very special kind of half-acre parcel, long, thin, narrow lots. The reason we did that was it would be very hard to put several of those together and have people build. Unfortunately, during this time, Riverside and Corona began to take chunks out of our city, and in a genuine David and Goliath fight, we became a city in December of 1964. But the siege of developers didn't stop. Representatives of developers placed themselves in chambers of commerce, they placed themselves in the city council, and the prize was the single owner large acre lots where dozens and even hundreds of small lot homes could be built. For 3 decades, battles at various public meetings were epic, and fistfights outside the chambers and at least twice inside were not rare, and I'm not kidding. You had a guy who was known as the battling mayor who would go over the dice and punch people out. Some of you remember Dr. Herring. But Norco persevered, and small lot, shiny sheet developers on many a 2-3 vote were turned away amidst cries that they were driving commerce away and Norco was business unfriendly. Then in the 1960s, the idea of building an equestrian community happened. And you had the JR spread, which was the beginning of Horsetown, USA. One other group I want to talk on before I bring you to the present is the freeway fighters. Freeway fighters were pretty heroic in my view. These were the people that stopped the freeway. And if you talk to somebody from Caltrans, they're still angry at Norco. But what happened is by stopping that freeway for 30 years, 40 years, you couldn't get in and out of Norco. So you couldn't build a bunch of houses, so everybody forgot about us. So during this period of turmoil, we called everybody, we got in fights, we did all kinds of stuff. But during this time, we suddenly found out who we were. Not suddenly, over time. And we realized what we were trying to protect. When the I-15 went through, we were ready. And this has now become our greatest commercial avenue. The Auto Mall and Target Center. By the 1980s, Norco, with its limited number of rooftops and low taxes, had little income to run the city. And once again, we were on the ropes financially. To survive, we needed commerce, sales tax. We became one of the first Southern California cities to create an auto mall, and it was fought every step of the way by some residents who claimed we should not use public funds to attract and assist dealers, and that we were ruining Norco's lifestyle. This is a cycle that continues over and over again. Target Center was also met with the same vicious opposition. And there's one of them sitting here, and I'm not going to point him out, but my hat is off to those council people that fought recall after recall and fought against residents who would come in and storm chambers and still built the Target Center, still built the Auto Mall, still created a base of financial support that carried this city for the next 30 years. And I absolutely applaud those people because they absolutely saved the city. And Larry, you know who I'm talking to. Still, we relied primarily on sales tax derived from one basket, one auto mall, a very volatile and cyclical income at best. Now we're going to kind of come to the present. The reason I went through all that is I want people to know that some of us old timers, I got here in '61, we know the battles, and we're fighting to protect a lifestyle that is becoming increasingly rare throughout maybe all of California. 2008 was described as the second worst economic meltdown in our nation's history. This collapse would see major institutions go bankrupt, massive foreclosures, and business expansion come to a complete standstill. 2008 devastated the auto industry, leveled cities, and Norco was in deep trouble financially. During the recession, sales tax revenues declined from a peak of $6.2 million in the fiscal year 2006-2007 to a low of $3.3 million in a fiscal year 2009-2010. I'm not certain many residents knew what bad shape we were in. Beth Groves was the city manager when I got elected. We had something called the 80 Lies. And one of them was, well, you want the good news or the bad news? I says, well, give me the good news. She says, there isn't any good news, it's all bad, so you can focus on that. I said, well, what's number one? She says, well, I'm not sure we can make payroll. It was tough. And you know, my hat's off to Verwin Hanna, Greg Newton, the late Malcolm Miller, Kathy Azevedo. Those were really tough times. We did a lot of cost-saving measures. And these were things that were unprecedented in other cities. We began to slash expenditures. We cut our payroll essentially in half. We made a very hard move from our own city fire department to CAL FIRE. And our workload, the workload was really laid on people who we kept. And they were having to do 2 and 3 jobs and yet still getting the same pay and sometimes less. So the plan was to diversify income. Now bear in mind, all of this has come, all of this has now come in just the last 6 years. We began to aggressively bring in new diversified businesses so that Norco would never again get caught with all their eggs in one basket. Attracting major business to a city with only 7,000 rooftops is not an easy task, and I have to give my hats off to Roger Brody back there. A lot of people underappreciate what he does, but he's our economic development director, and he is relentless in tracking things down. The added trick to all of this is we have to find businesses that don't encroach on our lifestyle. So in other words, we get a lot of flack. People say, hey, you didn't want that truck depot. Well, there's horses, what can I tell you? So we streamlined the permit process, inspection process, shortened the turnaround to encourage large and small businesses to invest in Norco. And over the last 4 years, we have attracted dozens. In fact, we have attracted, and some have come, some have stayed, some have gone. Over 300 businesses have come to the city of Norco. And I once presented a list to council, and it was really shocking to read it, and I missed quite a few. So now, after 12 consecutive quarters, just about 3 years, almost every industry group has been on the rise, culminating in a one-year record this year of over $6 million in sales tax revenues. We had $65,000 6 years ago in the general fund. Today, I'm not sure because we're kind of spending a lot of money right now. The goal was 10 million, but we're close to that 10 million mark, and I'm very, very proud of that.